All right, welcome to the seventh session of the BCMT practice sharing, BCMT assessment practice sharing. So we've heard 6 other speakers talk about a variety of topics and given you ample opportunities to try things in your classroom. I know we're right up against the end of the school year, but has anyone had a chance to try any of the things from any of the sessions in the last month or since the last time you were with us in one of these sessions? So feel free to share. What have we been trying?
Hi, I'm Bruce.
Hey, Bruce.
I've been using some of the stuff that Mr. Pruner talked about and trying to get those core competency assessments in and trying to show the kids that by putting grades to them, I'm showing they're of value rather than just the content, but the whole process of learning being valuable. And I've been trying to bring that into what I'm doing.
Nice, thanks. That idea of showing that you value is also really present in the last session with Steffi and Raya. Anybody else?
Yeah, speaking of them, I did the whiteboard assessment with the 3. So I did the exact thing, like exactly what the last session suggested to do, and I tried it, and it worked pretty great actually. So yeah, that was. So the answer is yes. I've been trying to put into practice.
So Andrew, because not everybody was here, can you just give a little bit of context, just a really brief context of what it is that you tried in particular? And Steffi's here and she'll correct you if you get it wrong.
Of course, right. Yes, I'm looking forward to that. So we together as a class discussed after some whiteboard work, what good whiteboard work looks like, and created a T-table of that. And then the next day, I did it over 4 classes, and I told them I was doing it over 4 classes. And then I compiled it all into one sort of global, this is the checklist. So this is not what we're looking for. This is what we're looking for. And this is in the middle. And then they self-assess after we do group work. I just sort of choose a group and put the magnet up against them and talk about, okay, so you guys are going to be assessing your group work today. And then they use a highlighter to show where they are on that spectrum. And it's not for marks. It's not for anything except to show them that we're valuing it and we're keeping track of it.
Yeah, nice. And did you see an improvement in their collaboration at the whiteboards?
Yeah, I've got some pretty great collaboration already. It felt a little bit unnecessary for some of them, but in the main, yes, the ones that I sort of keep my eye on, it's grade 9s. So it's typically a grade 9 boy that I have to sort of shepherd and herd back to the group. And so, yeah, so with a few of them, it definitely did improve. They do show some lack of insight into their own selves, but that's okay. That's part of the process too. We have a conversation about that, and that's good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody want to pile on there or ask Andrew any questions about that, or ask Bruce any questions about what they were doing, or share your own thing? What, are we shy all of a sudden?
I can hear something. I'm not sure if this is what I talked about at the beginning of the last session, though. So I've been working with learning standards and using it and the proficiency scale. And Richard helped me set up a Google Sheet for my class. And so I've got a way to document so that the kids can have a look at the Google Sheet to see where they are with different learning standards. It's been a big learning curve. We're more than halfway through the quarter, and I just figured out how to make the Google Sheet actually work successfully. But the kids are checking, and so I had one kid, trying to sort out like where his mark might be according to the feedback and the proficiency scales that I've assigned so far. So we'll see how it goes, but it feels like something manageable that I could now share with colleagues at my school to convince them that maybe a standards-based approach might be just as easy as recording a bunch of number grades in a mark book would be.
Nice. I'm sure there's people out there who are dying to see an image of what you're doing, and I don't know if you have that handy or if it's even shareable because of student names and so on, but what do you think?
And
I
Sue,
can
is
try.
it,
I just need a second to
Yeah,
see if I can find it on my computer.
go ahead, Mark. Did you want to add on to that?
I just had a question. So each student would see their individual progress, correct?
Yes.
And
So I
and
have,
are you feeding that from a central spreadsheet that automatically populates the individual ones?
yeah, I have two spreadsheets. One spreadsheet is a list of all the learning standards and a list of, so learning standards going down the side and then the students' names across the top. And
Yeah.
then that feeds into a second sheet where each student has their own page. And then the students will see a list of the learning standards and some comments and their proficiency scale. And then they only see that sheet. They can't see anyone else's sheet.
It publishes on the web, Mark, so the parents can see it as well if they want to, but
Okay, I'll be connecting with you because I'm going to be doing that.
Richard taught me how to do it. Like, I don't know, how long did we spend, Richard? Like 20 minutes over Zoom?
oh, like 2.5 minutes. You're such a fast study.
I have needed some help, like from the tech people at my school, because it took me a while to figure out the sharing piece.
Yeah,
So
well,
I've
that's
learned
great.
it a bunch.
Yeah, because I'll be
Yeah.
heading back to the classroom this summer for the grade 10 remedial stuff. And I've done all this stuff in the past, but in order to manage my whole collection versus individual student involved a lot of copying and pasting. So an automated kind of thing like that would help my summer, and it would help the kids' summers too.
Nice. So I just want to highlight something that's going on here, which is really was a goal coming out of the fall conference, was that through the sharing, connections are made, and that it's that intangible knowledge that lives inside us that needs to be transferred between people, as opposed to just resources, which is sort of how we grew up and expect to be able to share things as teachers. Now, as it is, Mark, Richard, and Susan already know each other really well, but feel free to jump in there if you want to be part of that party.
That's just a coincidence.
Carolina, you were going to jump in with something.
I tried that thing where we broke it into the process to have a question or a problem or a task and then ask for the process without erasing it. And when we were online, it was really handy for me to actually see what they're doing, because I don't have that walking around and seeing what they can do. And it was really interesting because a lot of the students asked me, well, what do you want me to show in here? Like, what's going to be counted for marks? And I said, I just need to know from you guys, because I can't walk around, what I can move on from, or what I need to reteach or go over in more detail. And they were like pretty keen on doing it. I don't have any of them here, but some of them shared it with me digitally, and then some of them just handed it in when we went back to school. And it was amazing. It was really, really cool.
And just so people understand that Carolina is not talking about the BC curriculum from 8 years ago. She's talking about processes because she works in Alberta. So they still use processes there. Anybody else have anything to share? I see Kevin put a link to something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it was after Mark's session and with some input from your book, Peter, that I co-created with a teacher I work with. So she wanted something that she could walk around while kids are doing tasks, do some documentation of the competencies, but she also wanted to keep track of their content knowledge. She happens to teach in a 6 to 8 multi-grade. So we debated about using this originally it was 3 students per page, and then she's also put some thought into using this is 1 student's page, grade 6, grade 7, grade 8. So she could see their growth over those 3 years. But that's what it was for her to collect data about her students in math. And she's working on geometry for the rest of this year. So she focused on that. So she's piloting it right now. We'll see how it goes.
Nice. Anybody have any questions for Kevin about that, or wants to jump in with their own versions of something like that?
I've been trying something similar, and I don't know if it's available in other districts, but we have a numeracy coordinator, and I just pawned off the creation of the spreadsheet that I wanted. I gave her an idea of what it wanted to look like, and now I'm waiting for it to come back. And so there may be people already in your district that can build these things for you.
Nice insight. Apparently in Kelowna, that person is Kevin.
There's many of us. There's many of us, but yeah.
All right. Susan, did you have anything you wanted we could do a screen share on, or did?
I got sidetracked because I was listening to everyone's conversation.
Okay, we don't have to be sitting and waiting. It's okay.
Actually, truthfully, my home internet connection is really horrible, and so I can't. If I'm on Zoom, that's all I can do. I can't access anything else online right now.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Anybody else?
Could I just in case I forget at the end, because this is like fresh, hot off the press news as of today. Of interest to all educators in mathematics. The Northwest in the fall will be going ahead. As of today, it's just been decided that it will be virtual instead of being face-to-face in Whistler. And so that'll be great. We're going to have like a Northwest style program with a lot of great speakers virtually. And then in the 2022, instead of just going to a high school in the Lower Mainland, we are going to be face-to-face in Whistler for our fall conference in 2022. So start planning now.
Mark, some people are wondering what the Northwest is.
Oh, okay. So the Northwest, especially for those who are joining us from outside of BC, every 3 years or every year there's a Northwest conference, but who hosts it varies, changes, it rotates from year to year. So BC hosts it, then Washington hosts it, and then Oregon hosts it. And so it's a 3-day conference instead of our usual 1-day conference. We try to bring in some big speakers from across North America and beyond. And we usually have it in a really nice location. So normally it would be up in Whistler, or we've had it in Victoria in the past. So this was to be, or 2021 is our year for the rotation. But just unfortunately, as well as things are improving, it's just not to a place yet where we can plan for a face-to-face conference. So we're still going to go ahead. It'll be a virtual conference, but we didn't want to leave Whistler too far behind. So we're going to go back there for a regular fall conference the year after.
Nice. And is that conference, is the Northwest going to be open to people who don't necessarily live in BC, Washington, or Oregon?
We invite everyone from BC to Antarctica to join us. It is, we'll have a fair registration rate. It'll include BCAMT membership, but it'll still be a very incredible bang for buck.
It's good because we have people coming from across Canada today.
Yeah.
And parts of the US. Yeah, welcome, Tracy. All right. Anybody else have anything they want to share?
Peter, I can probably share that spreadsheet that Susan was talking about, but I just need to log on to my other computer.
Okay.
I'll be like 2 seconds.
All right. I'm surprised you got good internet connection out there in the forest.
If I might interject, I'm in Ontario right now. This is Ann, and my stereotype of what British Columbia looks like is Richard's Forest right now. So I am totally delighted. I feel like I am in British Columbia when I see Richard's screen. So that makes me very happy.
Nice. does anyone else have anything? We're gonna turn this over to Ann in a few minutes, but while we're waiting for Richard to cue this up, anything else you want to share?
If I might interject, this is Bhavna. I'm at Langley Fine Arts.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've been working on is competencies as well. And we created a spreadsheet as well, a colleague and I, and we color coded it. And it's been so super because our color coding shows us in one glance where a kid is at. So if you've got, our extending is green, our proficient is blue, and so on. So in a big picture, you can see where the kids are at very, very quickly and where their trends are from unit to unit or from skill to skill or standard to standard, whatever we're calling it. So I do have that, and I did show it last year when I did my session at BCMT, but I'm happy to share that as well if I can figure out how to share my screen.
Okay, well, there's a little, you should see a share screen button at the bottom of your screen. And if you have that screen open on your computer before you hit the share button, it'll give you a menu of everything you could possibly share. And then you just click on that.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah?
There we go. Nice.
So unfortunately, I haven't gotten to the point where we can put this on a Google sheet so that kids can see it as well, but I leave this for the kids to be able to see. You can see down at the bottom, there are tabs for each of the students. So they can see exactly where they're at any point. So the top is the learning standards, and then the bottom is all the competencies. So the reasoning and analyzing, understanding and solving. And so we track what they do on all sorts of different assignments. So it could be, as we're talking about today, using conversations. So I might watch them doing something and then throw that in there. Like, today I saw that you were proficient on that standard, or how I saw you reasoning. I do deep dive assignments where they really dig in deep to see things or to explore mathematical ideas. And so we track that. And so there's lots of different ways to show that they have learning in all of these different areas. So yeah, this is the madness of our spreadsheet. And you can see that these are all the color codings down at the bottom. It took us some time to figure out how to do all of that, but I feel pretty happy with this. And like I said, it's really been helpful throughout the year to be able to look at this and go, hey, you're showing a general trend, or you're not showing a general trend. And we need to look at, if we take a look at Jules's understanding and solving, she's kind of been at developing plus the whole way through. So looking at maybe how do we improve that skill or that competency as we move forward. So yeah, it's been really, really super in big picture things.
Thank you. Thanks, Barbara.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Richard, you ready to go on a share?
Yeah, I got 2 different Zoom sessions going, so let's see how I make this work.
You got double the chances now.
Yeah. So this is what I shared with Susan. I changed the student names just to student 1 through 19, so it's not as obvious, but we called them a learning standard, and then whatever our expectation was with the different parts of it. And then it's a drop down. Sorry, I'm trying to do this over the Zoom call and look at the screen. You can choose where they are, because we have emerging, developing, proficient, extending. In some cases, evidence was missing if it was something we wanted to see around the room, or to be assessed, because it's also shared with parents. And then you can kind of go down and see where each student is. And then from there, how do I get around the Zoom thing? Oh, sorry. I know that's going to be small. There's one with, no. Yeah. So then each student, that feeds into this spreadsheet, and then I just take notes and put it on the side so I can see where each student is. And this gets published on the web. So the student can actually has a link to their own. And if they have something that they're not doing well in, they can go and see what they need to work on. So if they have a developing or whatever, or, if they want to show they're extending in something. So that's the intent with it. I just started doing it a little after Christmas, so it's got a little bit of work to go. But anyway, this part, the first 3 columns populate themselves. The 4th column are just my notes through classroom observation or what have you. And then it just fills itself down. So that's all it is.
That's all it is.
That's all it is.
Thanks, Richard.
Richard, did you say that when you put it into the spreadsheet that it auto-populates into the individual students, like you've created that circular logic or whatever?
Yeah, it's just a little bit of coding. It's not too bad, and if you have the template, it's fairly easy to do and have it work one through the other. Oh, I'm sharing my own face here. It's driving me crazy. But yeah, it'll populate each other, and then when you go into Google Docs, it'll say you just go down to publish to the web, and you can share an individual page, and it'll show the pages by the student's name. You just copy the link, email the link to the student, and then they can access their link. So I tried to do it through do a mail list, a mail merge to have it send out, but I haven't quite figured out how to do mail merge through Google Sheets. But if you could, it'd be really easy to send that out to everyone. So
Yeah.
So
if anybody
Love for
wants
you
a
to
blank
share
copy of
that
it,
template.
give it
Yes,
to you, and it's
please.
all sorted.
Actually, Richard, there's a Google extension that you can get, or an add-on for Google Sheets called Autocrat, which will do mail merge, because I use it for rental forms for my band instruments. And
Autocrat?
it's called Autocrat. Yeah. AUTOCRAT. And so you can set up your own templates in that.
Nice.
Oh, thank you.
So you should be able to do a mail merge with that.
Thank you.
So before we move on to Ann, first of all, I want to say thank you for this really robust sharing. We are in June. It's the last month of teaching, and still a lot of energy out there. One of the things that I really want to emphasize here is that, one of the things with assessment, so easy it's to get up into the clouds and to start thinking about what ideal assessment looks like in sort of the abstract utopian world. But what we're seeing here are real teachers implementing really sophisticated assessment ideas. And yeah, sometimes it takes a bit of effort, but some of these things actually are not super complicated to implement either. It's really just recognizing that there is a bridge between sort of what it is you want to do and what is achievable. And for those of you who live and work in BC, the BC assessment mandate sort of gives us a lot of permission to do a lot of different things. So, and that's what we're seeing here is a lot of diversity between ways to think about this. Seize those opportunities and tap into the human resources that make up this group and reach out, because as you can see, people are more than happy to share, right? And Richard,
Peter, sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Jen.
I'll wait.
Okay, so Richard.
Oh, okay, sure. Stupid Zoom with this delay, sorry. So I was just wondering, you were talking about sharing. To that end, have we decided whether we want to use some sort of a Google Doc, or not a Google Doc, but like a little Google file or a Google Drive or something where we can share some of these cool resources that we have, so that we're not emailing a zillion people or putting things in a bunch of different places?
We haven't decided that. So up until today, the only thing we've been sharing are ideas, and now all of a sudden we got some real cool digital tools that people want to share. So we can certainly create something and create a place where it can be archived, and then we can release that to the people who are present here today.
Okay, well, I could create a folder, and just if people want to put a Gmail in the chat for me, then I can add everybody to that folder, and then we can put whatever we want in there.
No, it's okay, Jane. We got this will be organized at the BCMT level.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. We got this one. All right. Without further ado, I am so excited to introduce to you Ann Arden. I have known Ann since 2009 when we had the Canadian Math Education Forum hosted in downtown Vancouver. One of those sessions was an assessment session, and this brought together math teachers and math leaders and mathematicians from all across the country. It's a conference that used to happen once every 4 years. And I was leading the assessment group, and Ann was coming in from Ontario with a couple of other teachers. I think there was 3 of you who came as a team and had some really exciting things to share. And since then, I've gotten to know Ann through numerous intersections, including some joint enterprises on the Canadian Math Education Study Group. Ann has been a classroom teacher for forever, 17 years, I think it was. She's, and then she was a, what was it you called it? Because we call it all sorts of different things. But
Instructional coach.
thank you, an instructional coach. When I had lots of opportunities to intersect with Ann, because I spent a lot of time in Ottawa. And now she's a vice principal. But Ann is actually one of the really deep thinkers about assessment in Ontario. She thinks about it in both really deep theoretical terms and really pragmatic terms as well. So she has really found a strong way to put some powerful ideas into really practical practice. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ann, who is going to do some sharing about things from Ontario with us. And
Thank you, Peter. And hello to everyone. I see that there's 60 of us together, and I know some of you are in British Columbia and some of you are in other places. And I'm actually going to ask you where you're from in a minute. Just to build on what Peter said, I'm Ann. I've been an educator for 21 years. I was a classroom math teacher at Rideau High School, at Sir Wilfrid Laurier Secondary School, and Osgood Township High School for 17 years. So those are a downtown as urban as Ottawa gets, a suburban and a rural high school in the Ottawa area. And then I was a math coach in our board and an instructional coach for 3 years, which meant that I was supporting 12 different high schools. So my school district has 78,000 students and 25 high schools and 150 elementary schools. So I got to support half of the high schools. There are 2 of us in the role. And my goodness, I learned so much from being a guest in many other people's buildings. That was wonderful. And over the last year, I've gone to the dark side, and I'm now a high school vice principal. And in Ontario, since January, there's been a lot of school closure. So we had 4 weeks of shutdown in January. We were open for 10 weeks, and then we've been shut down for the last 10 weeks of the school year. And there's no joy in sharing this, but it's been really interesting having conversations with teachers about assessment when the school is closed for an entire quadrimester, but I'll get onto that a little bit later. As Peter said, we've had a lot of opportunity to have intersections, and I've had the opportunity to work in a bunch of places in Ottawa, but it was my curiosity about assessment that actually drove me to apply to grad school, where I had the amazing opportunity to work with my mentor and my friend, Dr. Christine Sertem at the University of Ottawa. And that's how I came to meet Peter. The intersections are where I've actually learned the most. And I find the prep room, like, there's 2 really good things about being a math teacher. There's the shorthand that you have with your classroom next door neighbor. Like, I'm in 211, you're in 212, and we just talk really quick about this thing. And I just give you this quiz, and you look at it, and we just have this like nonverbal conversation because we know each other so well. And then there's this other really beautiful thing, which is where you talk about processes and you talk about overall expectations, and I talk about specific expectations, and you talk about British Columbia curriculum, and I talk about Ontario curriculum, and we talk about American curriculum and NCTM and BCAMT and OME and all of this. And then we have to just chuck the acronyms because we all do the same work. But I really find that when you work with people outside your district, outside your school, outside your school board, or whatever you call it, wherever you are, you just have to get down to the nuts and bolts. So I really had a couple of key formative experiences. In 2007, I was fortunate to attend NCTM in Atlanta. And I was a department head in Ontario with 14 teachers. And I was sitting in a session with a math department head in Chicago who had 40 teachers. And she was basically what in Ottawa we would call a math instructional coach. She didn't have any teaching sections. She was just entirely in her school to support students and teachers. And if you've ever had the opportunity to work with American teachers, and hi, Will Dunn, I'm just waving to you right now. What Americans call curriculum is basically a textbook. And, you know, we use these words and we mean different things. So I feel like my biggest learning has been at the intersections, because when you have to just take away those pieces and you can get right down to what it is that you're interested about, we're all here for the students and we're all here for learning. So the idea of change, of moving through some different schools and learning in different school districts has been really important to me. Peter, if you can put it to the next slide. This is the view from the bottom of my driveway right now. Obviously it's looking west, and I know that I see a lot of us here are wearing orange shirts tonight, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that. I like to do a land acknowledgement when I present. I don't know where we're all from. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but where I am presenting from, where I live, I learn, and I play is on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory. So the whole Ottawa-Gatineau area, Ontario and Quebec, is unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory. I'm 20 kilometers south of Parliament Hill right now, which is at the Quebec border, and I'm 40 kilometers north of New York State. So if we have some American friends, I'm pretty close to you. And I know in Vancouver and Lower Mainland, you're also very close to our American neighbors as well. If I could just get you in the chat, there's 63 of us here right now. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to wait, and I'm going to, like, you're going to answer the question and you're going to wait. It's a waterfall or a fall. I've heard it called different things. So I'm going to ask you actually where you're from. So I'd like everyone right now to go to the chat. Do not hit enter. Do not hit enter. I'm going to ask you, where are you from? And I'm going to do it in 3 phases. So when I hit your phase, and if you're in the province of British Columbia, you're going to be in the 3rd phase. I'm going to ask you to hit enter in a minute. So if you are from outside of Canada, can you just type in, hit send on where you're from right now? If you're outside of Canada, I'm seeing North Carolina. That's cool. Kansas. Wow. I've been to North Carolina. I haven't been to Kansas. I'm sure Peter has been everywhere, so we're not going to ask him. If you are from Canada, but not in British Columbia, if you are from Canada, but not British Columbia, can you hit enter right now to show me where you're from? Holy moly, I'm seeing a lot of Alberta, Grand Prairie, Sherwood Park, Grand Prairie, Treaty 4 territory, Saskatoon. I've got some friends in Saskatoon. Treaty 1, Alberta, Edmonton, amazing. I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, so I feel like I'm the easternmost Canadian in this conversation right now. And if you're from British Columbia, can you hit enter right now so we can see where you are from? I'm seeing Vancouver, I'm seeing Chilliwack, I'm seeing Port Moody, I'm seeing Vernon, Maple Ridge, Fort Langley, Abbotsford. These are like all the places the NHL players come from. And let's not get into the Leafs-Habs game the other night, but Port Moody, Surrey, New Westminster, West Kelowna, Comox Valley, Hazelton, 100 Mile House. This is exciting. Victoria, Burnaby. I want to visit all of you. So if, when the pandemic ends, if any of you have a spare room, you can shoot me a tweet or an email. I would very much appreciate that. So thank you very much. It's lovely to kind of see that most of you are from British Columbia, which we would all expect. But it's nice to see some other folks from Canada and 2 of you from North Carolina and Kansas as well joining us. If you can go to the next slide. So my presentation tonight is kind of got 2 pieces to it. It's kind of a setting the scene piece, and then there's some examples of student work as we go through. And then I'm going to really describe an example of something I did with a class in 2017, which is the last time I was fully immersed entirely in my own math classroom. And there's observations and conversations there. So This slide is global. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. Black and William, 1998, if those of you have been to grad school or have done some reading, Paul Black and Dylan William are incredible giants in the field of classroom assessment. And in a recent piece that they wrote in 2018, they defined assessment as a procedure for making inferences about student learning. Learners engage in tasks which generate data, and these data become evidence when they're used in support of particular claims. And I'm going to be honest with you, in my first 5-7 years of teaching, I thought that assessment and evaluation, I know that depending on your district and your location, we use these words a bit differently, but I'm using assessment in the most general term here. I thought that assessment meant plugging numbers into either a spreadsheet or a marks program. So the idea that assessment is about making inferences in support of particular claims brings us and brings my thinking from the realm of the quantitative to the qualitative. And I really found freedom in that. And I continue to support the teachers that I work with now as a vice principal with that idea of qualitative assessment and documentation. If you can go to the next slide, Peter. So here's an example, before you hit play, here's an example of a nobody cares question. It's a very basic, here's the area of a trapezoid. I'd like you to watch this student. The video is about 90 seconds, and I want you to think about the assessment piece. In the first part, the student doesn't speak and just writes down a bunch of numbers, and then there's a conversation with me about it. So I'd like you to think about what you would think about just the written work and then what the conversation adds. So if you can hit play. So there's no volume, like there's no conversation at the start. So this is what you would get on a quiz or a test, a bunch of numbers. So I don't know if anyone can hear all of this, and I can actually interject at this point. If you can't hear the video here right now, you can stop it, Peter. But I think that all of you can see that the kid just wrote a bunch of numbers, and the answer is actually correct. He circled the answer at the bottom 10 and just dropped the pencil, which I particularly enjoyed the pencil drop. But, you know, the way that the solution is presented is like rubbish, if I can draw on my own being born in England roots. Like, it's rubbish. He didn't show his work. He didn't like show anything whatsoever. But, you know, when I had the opportunity to actually talk to the kid, I said, what does the first number mean? And the kid said, it means this. And then I said, what does the second number mean? Where does that come from? How does 28 relate to this? Why did you divide by 2? What's going on here? So I'm just using this as a first example of the fact that written work alone, even though the answer was correct, this is a student who's very strong in math and got the right answer. But if I just got the written work in this case, it's just insufficient to delve into the student's thinking. So this is an example of grade 7 math in Ontario. It's just like, I'm not going into deep, rich problems here. The examples are just really quick, basic ones to talk about the assessment piece. But this is an example where I think we would all agree that the observations and conversations are much better than the product in this case. If you can go to the next slide. So nobody calls my landline anymore. What's that? So the first definition I showed was a research definition. about what assessment is. So coming from the world of research and then coming into the world of NCTM, the 2014 Principles to Actions defines assessment as a process where the primary purpose is to gather data that support the teaching and learning of math. Again, back in my first year of teaching, I'm not sure that I really thought about assessment as a process of gathering data to support teaching and learning. I think I thought in my first couple of years teaching that assessment was filling my grade book. So this is what NCTM says. If you can go to the next slide. Dylan William has this brilliant quote. So I've got two quotes from the same article on the next two slides. If students learned what they were taught, we'd never need to assess. We could instead just keep records of what we taught. But as every teacher knows, many students do not learn what they're taught. And like, I'm nodding my head at this. As a first and second year teacher, I was making major assumptions that students were like learning everything I lectured about. But I do like this idea that if students learned what they were taught, we wouldn't need to assess, but they don't learn what they're taught. They learn what they learn. So I know that all of us here have worked with Peter on vertical non-permanent surfaces. I had the very good fortune of working with a friend and colleague, Nat Banting from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And at an OAME session he presented in 2017 or 2018, he deliberately had groups working in horizontal surfaces, horizontal non-permanent surfaces. And we were in about 8 groups. And the whole point of his talk was that in horizontal settings, we all ended up working on different problems. We all ended up interpreting the question that he had posed that was up on the board. And as a bunch of math teachers, we all actually ended up working on different questions. So it's so interesting that as a bunch of keeners going to a math conference, we all ended up working on different problems. Never mind the kids that are in our classes, probably working on different problems and maybe not learning the things that we've taught as well. So next slide. So as a continuation on this article, Dylan William again said, even if all of our students started out at the same point, which is a highly unlikely situation, each of them will have reached a different understanding of the material being studied within a very short period of time. That's why assessment is the bridge between teaching and learning. It's only through assessment that we can find out whether what's happened in the classroom has produced the learning we intended. And this is why I became so passionate about assessment. It's what drove me to grad school. The difference between teaching and learning and understanding that assessment is that bridge between the teaching and the learning. And, you know, I could have all the whiz bangs and all the technology and all the smart boards and whatever. But if I was just lecturing and the kids weren't learning, I wanted to know more about leveraging the teaching I was trying to do with the learning I was trying to enact. So that's why assessment to me has always been something that I'm really passionate about, because I want to make sure that that connection between teaching and learning is there. Next slide. So we've gone from research to NCTM, and with apologies, because I think I'm the only Ontarian here, I'm going into Ontario policy right now. So in the year 2010, so a full 11 years ago, the Ontario Ministry of Education released this document called Growing Success. If you want to find it yourself, you just Google Growing Success Ontario. It's there for you. It's about 80 pages. It's for free. It's a PDF. You can have it. And it's been policy. It's been education policy since 2010. These two particular quotes I would like to draw to your attention. So in Ontario, it's been required policy that teachers use a variety of assessment strategies to elicit information about students' learning. These strategies should be triangulated to include observation, student-teacher conversations, and student products. And then the second quote there is, using multiple sources of evidence increases the reliability and validity of the evaluation of student learning. So literally half of my career, half of my teaching career, I have been required by Ontario Ministry of Education policy to triangulate observation, conversations, and products in my whatever you want to call it. In Ontario, we can now call them evidence records. You may call them mark books. You might have other names for it, but the idea of products, conversations, and observations is not new in Ontario. It's been actually required in policy for the last 10 years. Next slide. Here's a kind of a terrible slide from 2010. And I think if you look in the middle, you'll see moderated wikis, which will trigger you to understand that this slide is actually from the year 2010, because I don't think anyone would say moderated wikis these days. But this is an example from a Ministry of Education, an Ontario Ministry of Education slide from circa 2010 with this triangulation of evidence. So under observations, we can see things such as a running record. And I know that for my K-5 colleagues, that's something that you have actually spent a lot of time doing with language and math. A list of books read, so that's a numeracy piece. I'm not going to read all of them, but presenting, listening, speaking, and group skills. So there's lots there under observations. The middle column, conversations, notes, journals, blogs, wikis, LOL, portfolio conferencing, and then products. So I think a lot of us are really comfortable in the product realm with portfolios, checklists, videos, tests, quizzes, performance tasks. So what happened in 2010 was in Ontario, we went and looked at our list of sources of evidence, and we realized that basically everything we were doing was a product. And a huge piece, I spoke earlier about intersections, a huge piece of learning for me was, as a young teacher, my second year teaching, I ended up teaching a pile of music classes. As a sidebar, Alanis Morissette presented some music instruments to my class, and she was dating Ryan Reynolds at the time, who I know is from Vancouver. So Ryan Reynolds came with Alanis Morissette to present this Juno thing to my classroom. All that aside, to say, when I was teaching music, I realized I couldn't just do theory tests, because that's not what music is. But in the math class, that is what it is. So there's a student, she was a student who joined us from Iqaluit. Salima is her name. I won't say her last name, but I will never forget her. But I had her for first period math, grade 9, and second period music, grade 9. And she said to me at the end of the year in a very honest way, she said, "Miss, you're a different teacher. Like in math, you're different than you are in music." And I was like, unsure about that. And she said, "I think I like the music version of you better than the math version of you." She played the tenor saxophone and she did throat singing. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. This kid will always stay with me. But I came to terms pretty quickly as a music teacher with the fact that I actually had to assess performance. So that has brought me through the intervening 18 years about thinking, what does performance look like and mean in mathematics? What does it mean to perform math? Because I would suggest that a math test isn't really what it is to do math. So the idea of observations and conversations are really important. Next slide. Nearly finished here. So in our curriculum document in Ontario, so I'm citing here Black and William 2018, which is where the slide is actually from, but our policy document, and I've been in enough of Peter's sessions and read enough of his work that I know he's also, talked about this, that with assessment, it's really important to think about where the learner is going, where the learner is now, and how to get there. So these 5 ideas about clarifying, sharing, and understanding belongs to all of teachers, peers, and learners. But there's also roles for providing feedback that moves the learning forward and engineering effective discussions. If you'd like to see a lot more about that, I know that Peter's book, the Thinking Classrooms book from this year, 2021, has this, as well as Leahy and William et al. 2005 also talks a lot about this. Next slide. And we'll skip over that to slide 12. I've already kind of mentioned this, but current views on classroom assessment have shifted from viewing assessment as an event, like a math test, that measures the acquisition of knowledge towards a view of assessment as a social practice that provides continual information to support student learning. And when we come back after some breakout time, I'll be really interested in what your thoughts are about how we can kind of document what the continual information is. And here's the last slide, next one. In 2014 to 17, in my grade 9 math class, and here's 2 photographs of kids that actually were in my math class. Those are 2 different classrooms, clearly. In my grade 9 math class, I decided that I was going to go with my principal's full permission, who actually is ironically my current principal in my new school, in my new role. And she fully supported the idea of written and oral assessment and evaluation. And what I did was, for the 7 or 8 units that I had, was that there was a dot on the evidence record, and we can come back after some breakout rooms to talk about what an evidence record is, to decide that I needed products, and I kind of leapt off the edge with my music background to decide I wanted to evaluate performance as well. So the end of course mark was 50-50. It was half products, written things, and half conversations and observations that I had with the students. So what was really great about that, and you can see on the slide, the second bullet point was differentiated evidence records. So in Ontario, not every kid has to do the same test. They just have to demonstrate their understanding and achievement of specific and overall expectations in whatever course that they have. I know that in BC you have different words for this, but like the big ideas in a course. And it doesn't matter how students show their achievement or what they know and can do, if it's oral or product. So that brought me into this whole world of like suddenly my online Markbook doesn't work, because if you do this online, it means that every kid has the same assignments. But if some of the assignments don't work, for example, for English language learners, or for students with special education needs, or for students that are much better at writing or much better at speaking their understanding, why do they all have to do the same thing? So as a music teacher, I felt really comfortable with these ideas, and I was trying them out as a classroom math teacher, that maybe not everybody needed to be able to do the exact same assignment. So I had to let go of my online Markbook, and I was doing things and tracking things, which I can show after the breakout rooms, by hand, and then by a piece of software that my board has developed. And I gained some confidence from Ken O'Connor, who is from the Toronto area. He is a very experienced teacher from the Scarborough district, and then TDSB, and well written on the areas of assessment and evaluation. And I got to hear him speak early, like maybe 2010, 2009, around the same time I met Peter. And Ken O'Connor said, collect evidence until you're confident in the level of achievement. And he says, if the student is all over the place, you need to collect more data. And if the student's evidence of achievement is all in the same area, you can collect more if you want, but you kind of know where they are. But the idea of, keep collecting evidence until you're confident, and that not every student needs to have exactly the same number of assignments in, was really something that was new to me when I learned about that, and is something that I'm supporting the teachers that I'm working with right now. I firmly believe that. And last piece from this grade 9 math class was the summative exit interviews. So we have a provincial test, which we haven't run now for 2 years due to COVID in Ontario, called the provincial math test. Normally the students would write that, and they would do some other written task. And what I decided to do with this group of kids over a couple of years was they wrote the provincial test, which then I evaluated myself, particularly the long form questions. And then I also gave them vertical non-permanent surface kind of questions, but they could kind of survey themselves on a recipe about what they wanted to provide more evidence of. So I showed them their evidence record, and then they self-selected the kinds of questions and topics that they wanted to provide more evidence for. And even when they were working with other students, it was really easy for me to understand who knew what was going on. So if a kid was coaching the other kid to do it, I actually was getting evidence from tons of kids as I was listening into this evidence. So that was really kind of a key pivotal aha moment for me. So I'm going to leave it there for now, Peter, and turn it back to you. And with gratefulness, if you want to put it on slide 16 when we're done, my email and my Twitter are both there. But I'm keen for you to have a chance to connect and have a conversation. And then I'm happy to take questions and answers after that.
So I'll just briefly put it on slide 16 here. I think this is the one, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to reach out to Ann or catch her on Twitter, then those are her coordinates. But we're going to, I'll actually just capture that and drop them into the chat. So we're going to go into small breakout rooms. I recognize that some of you have to leave because of life and so on, but I'm going to throw you out into small groups for about 15 minutes to talk about some of the really big ideas that Ann has offered us here. And then we'll come back and then you'll get a chance to ask Ann a whole bunch of questions, as well as I know that she has more slides that actually, you know, rubber hits road type things. So I'm going to pause.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Okay, everyone's going to come flooding back here in a minute.
It was 31 degrees here in Grand Prairie today.
What?
Which makes my classroom about 26 degrees, which was not fun.
Didn't you have snow up there like 2 weeks ago?
It never snowed here. It snowed in Edmonton and Calgary, but we actually never got snow.
Oh, okay. All right, welcome back, everybody. For the groups I visited, there was some great conversations going on there. A lot of conversation around these sort of these self-evident truths around evidence and the purpose of evidence. I think you hit a nerve there, Ann. Do people have questions for Ann?
Sometimes it can be really hard to talk in these kind of situations. So I very much, and I know Peter would very much welcome questions in the chat. So please feel free to type, and I know Peter will moderate. Yeah. And I'm happy to expand on the idea of evidence, but let's see if there's some questions out there first.
We had a question from our group, Ann. It was just about something you mentioned when you showed your triangle, and specifically from the observation section, something called a process folio, which we hadn't heard of before, and we had some ideas about what it might be, and I'm not sure if that's your language or not, but if it is, can you shed some light?
I can shed some light. They're not my language, but I am very comfortable speaking about the 7 mathematical processes. And here's an example of the intersections where we talk about competencies and processes and expectations, where depending on the province that you're in, that word means different things. So let's put aside competency or process, and I'll explain what I mean, and you might have a different word for it. But in Ontario, the 7 mathematical processes, and this has been in place since 2000, so my entire teaching career, are communication and reasoning and use of technology. I'm actually just looking up the curriculum document right now, but reasoning and proving, communicating, that kind of thing. So give me a second.
I think we're all familiar with it because we had them in BC and they're currently in Alberta. Yeah.
So the words kind of mean different things. In Ontario, what we're required to do is report and construct. And the word constructing a grade was new to me. Like as a beginning teacher, I wouldn't have understood what that meant. Constructing a grade means you're selecting evidence and deciding what to put in the final mark. And it doesn't mean that everything a kid produces and everything that you grade goes into the final mark. So I'm going to use that word carefully, constructing a grade. And perhaps you don't construct the grade the same way for every kid. But in Ontario, what we're required to do is evaluate overall expectations. So there's like 12 or 13 of those for a course, something like in grade 9 math, for example, that basically a kid can do a y equals mx plus b situation. It's better language than that, but it's a math thing. And then there's also these process expectations that students can reason and prove. So what I did to combine those two things together was I had students put together a portfolio where they had to provide 14 examples, so 2 for each process. We have 7 processes: reasoning, improving, communication, that kind of thing. And they had to take the content knowledge they had, and they had to provide 2 examples of reasoning and proving. But that could be from, and I'm going to go to grade 9 math, I'm just going to dwell in that area. Perhaps one would be equations and inequalities. Perhaps they would show something, reasoning and proving why something couldn't be less than 0. Perhaps they would show something would be linear versus nonlinear. But they would talk about that curriculum expectation from a reasoning and proving lens. And then they could take, you know, a different expectation and talk about it in terms of communication. So the way that I used my process portfolio, which is not my language, but I did it, I've done it, is I used these verbs, which I know my mentor, my friend and mentor, Dr. Chris Sertam, always emphasizes that the math happens in the verbs of the curriculum, not the nouns. We always talk about equations and inequalities, but you know, the math is in the reasoning. It's not in the equation. It's in the reasoning about the equation. So the verbs there are really important. So those process portfolios or process solios or whatever you called it are framing curriculum content in terms of verbs and having students demonstrate that they can verb the math, not just solve the question.
Thanks for that, Ann. I want to draw attention to just sort of a meta construct here that Ann was talking about, which is that, did you notice how easy it was for her to talk about portfolios? Like when you approach portfolios from an evidence perspective, that it's a collection of data that is evidence of student learning. When you look at a portfolio from that perspective, it's so easy to talk about portfolios. When you talk about portfolios and you're trying to plug them into your mark book as an event, it's a really powerful mismatch, and it's square peg round hole type stuff. And it's just, it just showcased so nicely how easy it was to talk about portfolios as collections of evidence rather than an event. Other questions?
Hi, Peter. I have one question here. When we just talked about the portfolios right now, where we are saying it's the collection of evidence, I'm wondering, I'm a grade 8 and 9 math teacher, so I'm wondering if in that whole curriculum, if I ask the students, okay, you give me your evidence of what you have learned that you would like to be included in the portfolio based on our curricular competencies, then I'm wondering, they can pull out the things that they think are the best ones. And based on that, when we are doing the evaluation or putting it together for the assessment, how do we come to know, okay, how do I word it? How do I draw the line that this is where emerging is ending and developing is starting, or developing is ending and proficiency is starting? If they have not, because when I was listening to this conversation, we were talking that not all the assessments need to be taken in. So I'm wondering, when we say that, are we just talking about one component of it, that not all the assessments of it? It's kind of a little bit confusing for me.
I appreciate the question. So every time that I've used a portfolio, I use the portfolio as an interview tool. So we all know that students have older brothers and sisters and moms and dads and colleagues. And in Ontario, we've been shut for 14 weeks out of the 24 weeks this year in 2021. So these are the questions that the teachers in my building are asking, because the cameras are all off. I'm so loving seeing your faces right now. It makes me so happy that so many of you have your cameras on. If your camera's off, it's fine, I get it. But the way that I deal with a portfolio is not necessarily as a product. I view it as an interview tool. So the most rigorous assessment that I've ever had in my life was the defense of my master's thesis. So my friend and mentor, Chris Sertam, and 2 other University of Ottawa profs interviewed me. I took 6 courses, and then I wrote a 200-page thesis. If Peter had been my mentor, perhaps he would have made me only write 50 pages, maybe wrap it up a little quicker. But I did a master's with a thesis, and that was the most rigorous assessment I've ever experienced. It wasn't the writing of the thesis. I already had to have my thoughts together. It was the questions that my examiners asked me, the oral questions. So the reading and the writing prepared me and was the learning that I had. The writing wasn't the evidence of my learning. The writing was my actual learning. And then the oral defense of it was the evidence of my learning. So when I've done portfolios with students, I really, for 2 reasons, and I'm going to be very pragmatic here, I hate marking written work. Like, who likes to schlep the stuff home on Friday and schlep it back on Monday? Nobody likes that. Why not just talk to the kids about the work, and then you're done, and the work is done in the classroom and you don't have to take it home? And I think if we're talking about validity, having a conversation with a kid about their written work is better than marking their written work. Like having a conversation about, like, considering that the written work is their rough draft, that is their thinking at the time. And then you have a conversation, then you're not marking on Sunday afternoon either. So I think it's more valid, and I think it's more practical. So when I think about a portfolio, I'm not thinking about a portfolio as a product. I'm thinking about a portfolio as a conversation. The kid has to do the work. Like, I had to write my thesis. I had to do the work. The kid has to do the work to get the portfolio together. Then you have a conversation and you ask them questions. So you used a couple of verbs like emerging, and maybe I don't have the right words here, like level 2, level 3, like whatever your words are. You can figure that out, not by their writing. You haven't a clue. You push them, you ask them questions, and you can figure out if it's emerging or if it's proficient or whatever your vocabulary is in your district.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
And just because I know there was some conversations in the groups I was in, people were talking about, well, how do we prepare students for university, and what Anne's talking about. There are places in this world where university math students all have to be examined orally. So like Italy and Germany, if you're taking a Calculus 1 course at university there, you will have an oral final exam. And it will be rigorous. Because they don't believe that you can actually show understanding in written form.
If I can jump in and add to that, Peter.
Yeah.
I have been a University of Ottawa part-time prof for 3 years, but the 21 years I've been a high school teacher. I am, with all due respect to the university professor that's hosting this session and invited me, I'm not terribly interested in what universities have to say. I am absolutely unyielding in the fact that if I think just writing an exam is poor assessment, then I am not going to make my grade 9s write a terrible exam to prepare them for first year math, and then perpetuate that from grade 9, 10, and 11, and 12 to get to first year math when it's just bad practice. So I think that what we have to do is stake our territory as professionals, stake our territory as school teachers, as K-12 teachers, and say, good assessment practice is good assessment practice. This is in the service of student learning. To hell with the universities. And I'm not saying that I would really actually like to do my doctorate with Peter at some point. So
well, forget that.
Yeah,
no,
well,
and just to be honest, and we have to wrap this session up, I said the exact same thing in one of the breakout sessions, right? I don't feel that we should we work in the service of the universities. I just want to take this moment to thank, first of all, Anne, and I think we do our thank yous. it's always nice to have this injection of knowledge come into the space. And I promised I would put Ann's contact information in the chat, and I forgot to do that, so I'm doing it now. I also want to thank all of you who have come to a variety of these sessions throughout since October, and have the courage to try things in your classrooms and had the courage to share things. And you've had the ability to learn from each other, right? I don't think there's anything richer than teachers talking to each other about what it is they're doing and how we can implement things in our classrooms. So without belaboring this point, we plan to keep this conversation going next school year. We don't yet know what it's going to look like, but there's going to be ongoing, and we're thinking monthly, having the same structure, the structure of share what you've been doing, guest presenter who shares something from their practice, small groups to discuss it, Q&A. So we think it's been really effective. All right, so other than that, have a great last month of the year, and have a great summer, and we'll see you in the fall. So I'll stop the recording.